guys, what is up? My name is Kaylee. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am in a different location than normal because my husband's work schedule is very different and I have to film while the baby's napping, and the baby naps in the room where all my bookshelves are. So here we are doing a chill little, this is my desk, this is where I do my editing, this is where I do my writing and my coffee drinking and reading in the morning. Welcome. Got some Halloween-y things. I really actually like this one because it reminds me of the Diviners series, but yeah, hopefully I don't shake the table too much and the camera doesn't shake too much. We're gonna get into it. This is my August wrap-up. I read 12 books this month, all of which were for the Newts, the Magical Readathon, hosted by G over at Book Roast. I'll have that link down below. I had to read 10 books for the Newts, and I read all 10 of them, plus an additional 2, and it was an okay reading month. I had 2 3 stars, 4 4 stars, and 6 5 stars. So, without further ado, let's see what I read. My first 3-star, ironically enough, was for gorgeous cover, and I cannot find the dust jacket anywhere, which means one of my kids probably pilfered it from my room and lost it in there. So that sucks, as it was gorgeous, and it was the Owl Crate exclusive edition of Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret A. Rogerson, I want to say. I don't know where I got the 8 from, but Margaret Rogerson wrote Sorcery of Thorns. It was a 3-star for me. When I first read it, I gave it 3.5 stars and rounded up to a 4, and then the more that I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what, it just wasn't for me. This is a story about a girl who is a librarian, except library books are very different than they are in our world, in that they're like tomes that have magical powers, and only certain people can like touch them and know how to deal with them, and if they're touched the wrong way, they turn into these, like, I can't remember what they were called, but they're monsters, and they will be set upon the world and kill people. And there are 5 of these great libraries wherein people just like our main character Elizabeth work, and there's also like a whole cast of sorcerers outside of the library, and it was kind of muddled, I'll put it that way. The main character Elizabeth is plain and boring, and I think that can work in a lot of books, but not this one. I think that having the main character be kind of plain works because you can attach yourself to that character, you can see yourself as that character, and I think when it's done correctly, it's done well, it can actually further a story or get you to feel a little bit more invested anyway. It just didn't do it for me. The side characters were more interesting. I'm sure at this point, if you've seen other people that have read this, everybody loves Silas, who is like a demon. Demons can work for sorcerers, but there's an exchange of life, basically, in order for the demons to be the assistants slash basically slaves for these sorcerers. But Silas is the second character, Nathaniel Thorn, who Sorcery of Thorns, his like family demon that has been around forever. He was the most interesting character. Then Nathaniel was also relatively interesting and quippy and humorous, and then Elizabeth was just like whatever. It was okay. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. The writing itself was well done, but the plot and the story just wasn't there for me. There is slight representation. It's not exclusively written on the page, but we do have a bi character theoretically, and then also possibly an asexual character, but again, it doesn't explicitly state it on the page, it's just inferred. So yeah, 3 stars. I've talked a lot about how maybe YA fantasy is something I'm just not clicking with lately, and this and the next one are like perfect examples of that. But then I do have, you know, some rereads that are YA that I actually really love, so we'll see. Also, I wanted to point out I've got a very smoky look going on right now, which is not my usual for filming, but my favorite book of the month, I tried to emulate it a little bit, the cover, so we'll see if you can guess on the way up to my favorite book of the month what I was emulating. And the next book, one I've seen a lot of love for. It seems to be pretty well loved amongst booktubers, and it just wasn't for me, I guess, and that is House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. This is a story of 12 sisters who live on an island that are set to inherit the island, you know, once their father dies or gives it to them. The oldest 4 are dead by some means, and now the second in line from that, so it would have been the 6th in line from the top, is unconvinced that the most recent death was accidental. She thinks something happened. So the book is about her trying to figure out why this curse is on her family, where it came from, who was doing it, and it's a horror. It's definitely a YA fantasy horror, and the aspects of it I love the most were the descriptive moments of horror. It's something I haven't really seen done in other YA fantasy books, and it was easily my favorite part. The things I didn't like about it: there was insta-love. You all know, if you've been here a while, that just isn't my thing. Like, I don't care how young you are, you don't just meet someone and instantly, like, that's the love of your life. There's definitely insta-lust, that's cool, but like, this was insta-love. Like, would do anything for you forever and ever kind of love. So I don't really buy it. The relationships of the sisters, there was one sister in this group that never really conclusively gave the reason why she was such a bitch all the time. I think it was a plot device to try and divert your thought of how it would end to the sister, but it didn't work for me. That's all I can say, really. I don't know. People really loved it, so take what I say with a grain of salt. It just wasn't my book. My first 4-star read is my favorite Half-Night Stand by Christina Lauren. I picked this up because I was in a bit of a slump in the beginning of the month, and I just wanted something quick and easy, and I did speed through this in like 2 days. This is a story of a girl who hangs out with a bunch of guys. Like, they've been friends for 2 years now. She's one of the guys, and she ends up sleeping with one of the guys in this group of friends one night, and they don't even like stay together. He just leaves afterwards. That's why it's a half-night stand. And from that point, they've all decided that they need dates for a work thing that's happening months later, so they start an online dating profile, each of them. And from there, some drama ensues because the person that our main character Millie slept with, she ends up matching with on this site, and it just gets a little chaotic from there. I did really enjoy it. I had a lot of fun. I sped through it. I liked the romance build, and I liked some of the side characters a lot. Probably more than I liked Millie, because I really don't like the trope of like not like other girls, and they definitely pushed that a little bit with Millie. I read 2 of their books this month. I preferred the other one. Romance, as you know, is not my top genre. It's an okay genre. I can enjoy it, but I don't know. It was good. It just wasn't great. I don't like how it ended. I don't like the angle that was taken. It was very deceptive and not really explored enough once the deception was revealed. But generally speaking, I had fun with it, so 4 stars. And my next 4-star is also a Christina Lauren book, but I read it in e-format, and that is The Unhoneymooners. I think it's one of their more recent ones. They might have one out since then, but one of the most recent ones that they wrote. This is a story of a woman whose twin sister is getting married, and her groom's brother, the best man, they're like arch nemesis. They don't like each other. They've always hated each other. And everyone in the wedding party and guests get excessively ill from some bacteria that was in the food that they ate. But the sister, the maid of honor, and the brother, the the best man, are the only 2 people that didn't eat the food. So they end up taking the vacation that the bride and groom were supposed to take for their honeymoon. So it's an enemies to lovers story. Very fun also. I really like the buildup of the romance. I'm a big fan of enemies to lovers, so I expected going in to enjoy it. My complaints with it are that I feel like the main character, whose name I am forgetting entirely right now, but she was messy and inconsistent in terms of her body image, which was talked about a lot. She had a lot of like self-fat hatred, but then in the same token, sometimes she'd be like, I love my curves and I love the way I look and I don't care if anyone thinks otherwise. And then she'd go back and forth. And I feel like it would have been much better if they just stuck to one or the other. I do think it's pretty realistic for a woman to have her ups and downs in terms of feeling herself and not feeling herself, but I just think in this, they kind of missed the mark because it came off a lot more shame than it did lack of confidence. And it's one of those things that you're walking a bitter edge writing that kind of story in the first place, but I don't think they handled it the best. However, I really, really did like the storyline. The ending was kind of, I don't want to say it was like super good, but there was some stuff that happened that was problematic without giving anything away, and it wraps up pretty well from that. But I'm also not like a huge cookie cutter things end well fan, so take it for what you will. It was knocked off a star because of that, but I did really enjoy both Christina Lauren novels that I read last month. My next 4-star is All My Friends Are Superheroes by Andrew Kaufman. This wasn't a full 5-star because I just feel like there could have been more. It was more of a novella than a novel, but it is a story about superheroes, just everyday superheroes, and some of that was the best part of it, is just this everyday superheroes. Like, I think I brought up in my vlog, but it's my favorite one was, now I can't remember it, but it was just like the superhero, the power they had was just that everything was always put in its place because that person's superpower was that they never left anything out and untidy. Stuff like that. Like, there was some really common ones, and then they have the actual like superhero stuff like invisibility and mind reading and that kind of thing. But it's really about a story about a husband and wife who, on their wedding night, the jealous ex-boyfriend tells the bride that her husband's invisible, that she can't see him anymore. And it's really a story about that husband trying to prove that he's still there and exists. She has no idea. She thinks he's just left, and he spends, I think, 6 months trying to convince her to see him. And then she gets on a plane to move to her new life, and he gets on a plane with her and has to spend that, like, he knows if they land and she doesn't see him, it's over. And you get splices of their story pre this wedding, also splices of just random superheroes in the world. So it's a little discombobulated, but I did really have fun with it. So 4 stars. It's a quick read if you want something for like future readathons. It's definitely a good one to have for a week-long readathon. And my final 4-star is one that so far the series has been a solid 5-star for me, but for whatever reason this one just had a lot of semantics, probably to like bridge the storyline, and that is Princess Jellyfish Volume 4 by Akiko Higashimura. I really, really love this series. I talk about it a lot, and I did get comments recently, so to clarify, I consider this contemporary. I do read a lot of fantasy when it comes to manga and graphic novels, and when I picked up Princess Jellyfish, I too thought it was fantasy. I think at most, you might teeter very, very minimally in magical realism, but generally speaking, this is definitely contemporary. Story about, we've gone over this before, so go ahead and just skip ahead if you don't need to hear this, but 6 girls, I believe it's 6 girls that live in an apartment building, and these girls all have their own specific obsessions with things that are abnormal for women to like one's obsessed with trains, and another's obsessed with one specific war, and our main character's obsessed with jellyfish. They're about to lose their apartment to a company that wants to build like an expensive luxury high-rise, and our main character, who's obsessed with jellyfish, befriends the like prime minister's son at some point, and he is helping them basically. The secret is though, is that they all think he's a woman because he dresses as a woman, always has. It's something that his prime minister dad does not like, but they think he's a woman, and otherwise they wouldn't let him in this building, and he's trying to help them essentially keep their apartment to themselves. At this point in the graphic, or in the manga series, this isn't really a spoiler, they're trying to create their own company to make dresses, since that's his fascination, but also they incorporate the jellyfish fascination, and so they're building a business, which kind of got a little slow for me in this story. There are some side stories that aren't that great. Like there's definitely a little bit of blackmailing and sexual assault, and I don't really like that storyline. But aside from that, I don't really think that I can think of any other problematic elements in it, and I'm really enjoying it. And I think that if you are into manga, especially, what else could I compare it to? I guess a little bit like Orange, but without the depression, because Orange is a very depressing plotline. You would probably like Princess Jellyfish. And normally when I do a reread and I give it 5 stars, I just put it at the beginning of my 5 stars and not like it was the best book of the month, because it might be, but I don't want to put it above new books. So the next 2 books are 5-star ratings, but they're also rereads. So here we go. We've got A Dirty Job by Christopher Moore. This is a story about a guy who loses his wife the day that his daughter is born. So he has to raise his daughter alone, but also he sees the person that comes to take her soul, which isn't supposed to happen. And now he thinks that he is like the Illuminus, the death bringer. He is a reaper, basically. Because he doesn't know what he's doing, he kind of messes up in the beginning. So now the dark is coming for the town, and he has to figure out how to 1, do his job, 2, be a dad solo, and 3, basically save San Francisco where they live. I read this with Jamie over at Jamie Reads. She and I did a buddy read for it. It was the first time she read it, and this is my second read. I read it like, I don't know, 5 years ago, and I had a lot of fun with it. Christopher Moore has a lot of humor written in his books. They definitely are like, they read like they're written in the 90s and early 2000s in terms of political correctness and that kind of thing. But I definitely went into my rereads of Christopher Moore the last 2 months wondering if I could still call him one of my favorite authors, and I think that it is still a fair title. I do really love Christopher Moore, and I highly recommend him. My next reread was for the Diviners Readalong, and of course it was The Diviners by Libba Bray. I read this physically, and everyone kept talking about the audiobooks, and I should have read the audiobook because I did for The Layer of Dreams this month, and the audiobook is as fantastic as everyone else said. So I might honestly just re-listen to The Diviners once we're caught up on audiobook, because I loved it that much. The person, it's just a single narrator, but she narrates all the voices specifically, and it's so easy to identify even without hearing like who it is supposed to be talking. Love how she voices Theta, love how she voices Evie. It's just such a great story, generally speaking. So this is about, it's set in the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, where there's prohibition, and you've got a cast of characters that all have, to some degree, a power. That's what the Diviners are. And these are people that, some of them hadn't previously had any powers, and some have and lost them. Like there's just a whole, you run the gamut, but their powers are all increasing right now. And in this one, you've got a ghost that is kind of tearing up New York and killing people in like a cultish fashion. Each murder has a specific thing that happens to that murder to identify some level of cult symbolism. I'm trying to do it without like giving anything away. This book is definitely, it's YA, but it definitely has a lot of like horror elements, and if you're easily scared, I have heard a lot of people do find this incredibly creepy. I am not easily scared by books, so I don't think so, but I do understand it, especially having listened to Layer of Dreams via audiobook. The narrator does such a fantastic job of making it super, super creepy, so I do highly recommend the audiobook if you do like audiobooks. But reading it physically is just as good, which is what I did this month. Total 5 stars. This is easily one of my favorite series ever. I said it when I first read it. I think one of my first videos on the channel, I talk about the Diviners like a ton, because one of my favorite casts of characters. Just love this book. Love it, love it, love it. My next 5 stars is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is the story of a little boy who's losing his mother to cancer and his attempt to deal with it. It is fantastical because there is a tree that comes to life in his backyard to tell him stories. And it really is, it's very short and a very quick read. I could have read it in one sitting, but I broke it up over 2 days. I cried. It was very sad, especially as a mother. It is a very heartbreaking story, so know that There's probably no way you'll go into this and not think it's heartbreaking. Very well written. It is just, it's good. It's not my favorite of the month just because when you get a story this little, you don't really have time to truly invest yourself in the characters. I think that if it had been more fleshed out, I probably would have found it more boring, so I think that the shortness does it justice, but I just like longer books, I guess, is why it's not further up in the chain, but a total 5-star. And on the very last day of August, I read the first volume of Fence. I don't remember the author's name, but I'll have the image up here. So I also read 2 and 3 in September, so you'll hear about that later, but I picked it up because Kayla over at On the Fritz, I'll link her down below, tweeted and was like, hey, it's the last day to use your Hoopla credits. You should go do that. And I was like, geez, I always forget. So I went and I looked and I found some graphic novels that I could download for my August credits. And Fence volumes 1 through 3 were the ones I chose. So I read the first one in one sitting and I didn't think I would like it, honestly. I don't care about the sport fencing. It is literally just a story about a fencing team and trying to try out for a fencing team. Our main character, Nicholas, needs to make the team in order to get a scholarship to go to the school that he is fencing for. If he doesn't get the scholarship, he can't go to the school. So the first, and he's up against someone who nationally is ranked number 2, who also needs to make the team in order to go to the school. So that's the conflict between those two is what carries the story so far. But it's fun. It's just a bunch of guys trying out for this team, and they're all so individual and snappy, and I mean, they're like high schoolers, right? So they're, I think, 16, 17 years old, and it's just fun, and the art is really well done. It's very crisp and clean and colorful, and I like it. I highly recommend it. That's it. We've got 2 more left. So my second favorite book of the month was Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya. This is volume 1. I believe it's an omnibus, so it's the collector's edition volumes 1 and 2. I didn't know anything going into it, and I think that's the way to do it. I thought it was contemporary, and it turns out it is not contemporary, so it's the opposite of Princess Jellyfish. This is a fantasy story about a girl who's lost her mother, and her grandpa is redoing his house, so she has to live elsewhere, and she says she's living with a friend, but the truth is that she's taken up residence in a tent on this property. She doesn't realize it's the property of a classmate. He and his cousins stumble upon her and say, you can't live in this tent, just come live with us temporarily. And a bunch of stuff happens because she finds out their family secret, and normally that would mean that she'd need to get her memories erased, but at this point, for whatever reason, they trust her and they want her to be part of their lives. And it's just the stuff that happens from that point. The more people that come into the house and she meets, the more invested she is in the family and the secret. And it's just a very fun story, and I keep thinking about it, and I really want to get the next volume, but it's on hold at the library and I haven't got an email yet. So was hoping to read it soon because I'm in a slump right now, and graphic novels and manga usually get me out of them. So hopefully soon. Total 5-star. If you're sleeping on this one like I was, don't sleep on it anymore. And last but not least, my favorite book of the month came out last month. I finished it in the nick of time. I finished it on the 31st of August. My makeup is nice and smoky with a hint of blue because I read The Dragon Republic by Rebecca Kwong. Well, R.F. Kwong. Her name is Rebecca. Follow her on Twitter. She's a gem in the society, in the community of readers and writers, and I don't know if you guys all follow her, but she literally, Rick Riordan, who wrote the Percy Jackson series, tweeted about how much he was loving this, or I think it was the Poppy War maybe, but regardless, she like fangirled hard, and I just really love R.F. Kwong. This book is the sequel to the Poppy War, which I actually gave 4 stars because it had some pacing issues and it went a little slow, and it took me longer than I expected it to take me because of the pacing issues. But that's a story about opium addiction and opium sales, and a girl who tries to get out of that life by going to a school for assassins. She makes it in, she learns to be an assassin and also a shaman, and then goes on to the war. The war takes a really long time in the Poppy War. which was part of the problem. But going into the Dragon Republic, you're beyond that and the aftermath of that, and everything that happens to the main character Rin in the first book, she's trying to deal with in this book. And one of my favorite things about Rin, the character, is that she's kind of an idiot, honestly. And R.F. Kuang has even admitted to that like she doesn't really like Rin, but you're not supposed to, because she makes mistakes. She's young, she's never been to war before the first book. She thinks that she knows everything, but she doesn't. She's not necessarily an unlikable character, she's just very realistic. My favorite characters are the side characters in this story. In the Poppy War, Kitay and Nezha, and basically they have a group called the Psych that are all shamans, and I loved all of those characters, and they carried, like, my love for them carried into this book. So the side characters are all very dynamic and have their own personalities. This book had humor in it, but also super trigger warnings for the whole series. It is incredibly violent. There are a lot of very explicitly explained murder tactics that involve babies, like literal babies, and pregnant women, and there's rape on page and just a lot of vicious, violent stuff. But it is an adult fantasy, so it is not a YA fantasy. This is not for kids unless you're mature and want to read this. It's a lot, and there were scenes definitely in the Poppy War that even had me a little bit queasy, and I tend to not get affected by that kind of stuff. But I think she's breaking ground with it, and this book was incredible, and I think everybody should read it, especially if you read the Poppy War and liked it. This is even a step above that, which in my opinion, and I've said it before, with J. Kristoff books, it's really hard to write a sequel that steps up from the initial book. That's just my opinion. That's what I've seen in all the books that I've read, with the exception of a handful, and this is an exception. Such a great read. 5 stars, easily favorite book of the month. Alright, so that is it for me. Thank you for dealing with the new angle and for being here. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you read last month that you loved or didn't love. Did you complete your newts? If you did, congrats. If you didn't, there's always next year. You did good. I did good. I'm proud. I'm hoping to break through the reading slump I'm in right now, because I finished a total of 1 book so far, and I believe it's the 8th, the 9th? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Alright, that's it for me, guys. Go ahead and like if you like this video, subscribe if you are new here and would like to see more content from me. I leave all my social media links down below. You can find me on Instagram and Goodreads and Twitter. I also have links to my Book of the Month Club. The adult version gets you a free book and me a free book, and the YA version gives you a discounted rate, and I get a small commission off of that. Otherwise, that's it for me. I hope you're doing well. I hope September is going better for you than it is for me in terms of reading. But I'm happy to see you here, guys, and I will see you in the next one.